Watching news at Prime. Let's get into this discussion now. Some advocacy groups say the Judicial Tribunal's decision to clear Eastern Cape Judge President Selby Mbenenge of gross misconduct in a sexual harassment case brought by the former Secretary Andiswa Mengo may discourage others from coming forward. It found that explicit WhatsApp exchanges with the then 37-year-old were consensual. Masimanyane Women's Rights International, Dr. Leslie Ann Foster joining us now to react to what has come out of the media on the back of this. Good evening to you, Dr. Foster. I need to preface our discussion with this disclaimer, and that is that we are talking based on a leaked document. Having said that, the Chief Justice's office has not countenanced it, meaning that there is actually nothing wrong with what we are reporting on. If there was, I suppose they would have corrected that by now. And so let's push ahead, therefore. Your immediate reaction to the news that Justice Mbenenge has been cleared here, although there has been findings in some regard.
Yes, I think it hasn't come as a surprise. We were hopeful that there would be a much deeper gender analysis applied to the case, but it doesn't surprise us that that was not done. And the findings don't surprise us either. So I think that, from the women's sector, from the gender-based violence sector, would be a general feeling. People are saying, and we've read several documents, including the judgment, that we are very deeply disappointed in it, but not surprised. And the reason why I'm saying we're not surprised is because we do lack an understanding of inequality in our society. In this particular case, we believe that the historical perspectives have not been taken into account. The historical perspectives of inequality, of how Black women in particular are treated, how they are viewed within our society, both historically and currently. And it takes us back very, very significantly because, future cases will be measured or be this will form a basis for considering other cases of sexual harassment in the future. So it's very disappointing to us as gender activists because we've been fighting for decades for an understanding of the issues of inequality, the power and control issues that have, played out in this case. And what we've got, is a judgment that is not strong enough in bringing a message across that such kind of behavior will not be tolerated.
Yeah, this is a tribunal, Dr. Foster, that divided public opinion. People glued to their screens for hours on end because what they were listening to was simply riveting for them, just the detail, the salacious details of this. And the reason I'm saying that this divided public opinion, there are some people who wrote about it very publicly so, and I'm going to quote one of the people. Her name is Gillian Skitter, and she describes herself as writing as a social feminist who writes from Black proximity, she says. And her observations, particularly around Andiswa Mengo, is that, and I want to quote her directly, that she says, Andiswa Mengo was useful while a guilty verdict could advance careers. Now that currency is gone. She will be cast aside and left to carry the fallout alone. She does detail part of what these findings say, simply that there are serious credibility issues about her testimony, and in some parts she decided to omit certain WhatsApp messages, and this was intentional on her part. How do you counter that?
Look, I think the main thrust of what I see in this case is the issue of inequality, the power plays. You have a very highly respected person of very high status who had this engagement with a much younger, a much junior person who was a woman. And that power play, that inequality there was not considered. I mean, in the findings, they talk about the framing of the case, as not being looking at the issue of equality. They've taken what we call a neutral response, to this. And I think the chair of the tribunal, was very explicit in saying, this is what is taken. And yet the Constitution says that we have to take into account the historical context when it comes to inequality, when it comes to how Black women in particular are addressed. And I think what we're going to see here is that the young woman is going to be vilified. I know that the issues of her having not given evidence, all of the evidence that was available. And I've read the judgment, it's saying, but she said this and she accepted it in such places. That shows a lack of understanding about how gender-based violence actually plays out, because women will not feel courageous enough to reveal all of the interactions that go along. In this case, where there is such intense, power, the young woman may have played along, and she says in some cases that she did, because she was intimidated. In our understanding of how gender-based violence works, she was intimidated by that power, and she would play along, and did play along. She admits to some of that, but we need to understand that there is this issue around, and it's not a South African issue, it's a global issue. The Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women speaks specifically around these issues of how, power plays out, and how we have to understand that women will, in some cases, in many cases, in actual fact, even domestic violence cases, will play into those power gains out of fear of intimidation, out of fear of losing a job. There are many reasons why women do this, thinking that they're protecting themselves. And I think that hasn't been taken into account. And we're very disappointed in the way in which this was reviewed.
It's a very interesting view because for some people, Dr. Foster, and again, yes, I'm going to quote Gillian Skitter and her writings here, because she seemed to hold this view as far back as the 5th of July last year. This would have been at the heart of all of this was playing out. And she says in her article, this is not what you describe it to be, Dr. Foster, that this is workplace abuse. In her view, it is a contest over how a Black woman's flirtation, ambiguity, and bold sexual expression is to be read, and how it is flattened by expert feminist discourse into a safer terrain of victimhood. It is a trial against African epistemologies. How do you counter that? Once again, I use that word.
Well, I think I'm aware of what she wrote earlier on, and even at that stage, many of us were concerned about her framing, of this case in the way that she did. I think it doesn't again take into account the historical perspectives that we have, doesn't take into account, what the Constitution recognizes, as inequality. And this has been framed as an approach, it was framed in an approach of neutrality. So I think that the feminist analysis we have now of what happens in workplaces to women generally and Black women in particular wasn't considered in this context. And very clearly, the chair of the tribunal said that he was not going to take that approach, that he was going to take approach of neutrality. So we know then that the guarantees, the constitutional guarantees grounded in Section 9 of equality and freedom from discrimination and the Section 12 protection against all forms of violence wasn't considered. And I think we would have had a much different outcome if that had happened. So I think, there are very many different views on this. As feminists, that activists that are working at the rock base who see the discrimination and the oppression of women on a daily basis through the women we interact with, and our particular experience around seeing violence in the workplace, we are basing, the views that we have on those experiences that women have reported to our officers and which we're discussing on a national basis.
Yeah. Whichever way you look at it, Dr. Foster, two people were involved here, and the judge did not mince his words that these indeed were his words. He's a married man, but nonetheless, this is now a point where all of this was taking place between the two of them, but that it is public, he now has to defend himself. I'm trying to work out in my mind how he is seen by the public now on the back of this of these findings versus how Andiswa Mengo is going to be seen and viewed in public. And by the way, the judge says he's going back to work as early as tomorrow morning. He's going to be reporting for duty. What becomes of Andiswa Mengo? Does she go back to work as well?
Well, as a patriarchal society, he's going to go back and he'll probably get a lot of, congratulatory messages for having, survived this tribunal. But what that does in the future is that it opens the door for other people in the workplace in powerful positions to continue abusing women. I have to say that because it's important. What happens to Andiswa Mengo, I don't know what's going to happen to her, but she's going to have a very different experience. And as we know from other cases that have high-profile cases that have come, to our attention, she will suffer immense discrimination. She will suffer isolation. She will have many difficulties. People will, even if she leaves her workplace and applies for work elsewhere, she will find it difficult, to be taken into another work situation. The discrimination is going to continue, against her in several different ways. And I think the other thing is, it's because it's not just about the judge and about Ms. Mengo, but it's about women generally and men in high positions. We have to look at it from that perspective, is that women will be afraid to report on these cases in future. And that's very, very challenging for us in our immense struggle in this country on gender-based violence, which has just been declared a national disaster. This takes us back decades. Believe you me, we are going to have immense problems, particularly for women in the workplace. And we're not even looking at the ILO Convention, 190, which talks about sexual harassment in the workplace. I don't believe that in this tribunal, any of the instruments that work together to give us a clearer understanding of how abuse happens in the workplace has actually been taken into account. That is deeply distressing and deeply disappointing to us.
Dr. Lesley-Ann Foster, thank you very much indeed for your time and contributions to what I'm sure is going to be ongoing conversations around the country about what has happened here, and up until such time that we receive the full text of this particular tribunal outcomes. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Dr. Lesley-Ann Foster is with the Masimanyane Women's Rights International.